Hi, Nick here from Greenspace with another My Greenspace video. Today we're going to be profiling snake plants, also referred to as mother-in-law's tongue. As a little aside at the beginning now, they used to be classified as Sansevieria, but more recent DNA work has kind of shown that there isn't a huge difference between them and another closely related group called Dracaena. So they've actually all been reclassified under Dracaena, but for the sake of this video and for the sake of common parlance, we're still going to refer to them as Sansevieria. For most people, they will know what we talk about when we say Sansevieria. So Sansevieria contained approximately 70 or so species, mainly within Africa, but then also reaching through towards India and parts of Asia. They come in quite a number of different forms and shapes. They grow in full sun. They grow in more shady locations. But one of the kind of key things that runs through all of them is that they are fairly succulent plants. Now, sometimes the succulence is within the leaf, where it stores a bit of moisture within the thicker kind of succulent leaf, especially on some types. But they also do then store a fair amount of energy and water within their underground parts, or thickened rhizomes usually. As you can see kind of before me and then behind me as well, there is quite a variety in terms of plant size. So there are some taller varieties with very upright leaves. There are mid-level types. Again, with upright leaves, they're mid-level types with leaves that are more arching in nature. And then you've got some of the smaller types and cultivars that are fantastic for little pots. These grow very well in Zambia, either both outside and inside. But there's just a few things that we would have to kind of go through in terms of making sure that you get the most out of them, especially if you're taking them in the home. With most of the Sansevierias, they will do quite happily in a partial shade position, where they're not in deep shade, where they get some level of light. And ideally inside, we're talking more about reflected light at that stage. This can be against a wall or somewhere close to a window where there is fairly bright light that they receive. Some of the darker leaved varieties are more suited to growing indoors because there's more chlorophyll in the leaves, and they will actually be able to then put up with darker locations where that leaf is able to capture more of the available light that then comes into the space. So if we look at this one right here, this is actually a cultivar called Moonlight, and usually it would have much more kind of gray-green or gray-blue kind of leaves, as can be seen in this one just up above, where these are coming out actually quite light in color. But this one has been growing in a darker environment, and what we've had is that these leaves are actually going more green, just to be able to ensure that it is still producing enough of its own energy to grow and prosper. We have these types here would have then that kind of yellow or yellow-green stripe along the edge. And there's a few different cultivars of this type, some that grow quite tall, as Laurentii here is beside me, which gives a very lovely upright kind of stature to the plant, and is fantastic as a specimen plant in an area where you want to kind of draw the eye up a little bit. But then we've also got this type here, which is a much smaller rosette-forming plant. So this will rarely grow more than a few inches tall. It forms these open kind of rosettes with the leaves, where as the leaves kind of mature, they start to angle down and form a little bit more of a prostrate outer rosette of leaves to the inner one. We've also got kind of usually what we refer to as the whale fin types. Now these are quite broad-leaved types. Usually again with the leaf more kind of flat, never flat on the soil surface, but slightly raised and arching in a sense. And these plants are usually pretty stout. It's a very thick leaf. They do have a fairly thick rhizome too, and in a 15 centimeter pot like this, you can actually already see that it's starting to push the soil up a little bit. So these ones are a little bit more finicky in terms of growing in a pot like this, and quite happy growing in the open garden outside, where they have much more room to spread and those rhizomes can move through without hitting up against things like the sides of the pot. So here in Zambia, we have a number of indigenous species of Sansevieria. This is actually one. This is Sansevieria kirkii, or now would be Dracaena kirkii. This is actually quite a thick leaf type. If I was to cut this leaf in half, what we'd actually find is that the thickness in the center of the leaf is probably almost about 1 centimeter. Quite thick. It stores quite a bit of moisture. In the open garden, these plants, once the dry season sets in, do not have to be watered. We've got a number of these in our landscape. As soon as the rains end, they don't get any water until the next rainy season starts. And that can be from 6 months to 8 months, even 9 months, if the rains are late or if they end early. As long as they're in a location where they are quite happy, and that's usually a partial shade location, they will be perfectly fine. We also then have some of the more cylindrical types. Now, these are ones where the leaves, rather than being flat or more kind of wedge-shaped, actually kind of form into almost like a little cylinder. So this one here, which we refer to as sparkles, has these upright, quite short leaves, cylindrical type leaves, with ending in a little kind of point. These can be a little sharp sometimes if you hit it in a sensitive area, especially under the fingernails. And these plants, usually again, we're looking at maybe, a few inches high, but as you can see, it sends out new growth and will eventually clump up to form a nice kind of clumped shape within this 15 centimeter pot. Quite easy to grow. Again, not too difficult in the house, but again, somewhere where a bit more bright light. So this is then another cylindrical type here. This is starfish, because the kind of shape of the plant at this stage gives that kind of starfish-like appearance. It has, again, the cylindrical leaves, as you can see here, quite thick, a little longer than the sparkle type, but mostly in kind of one plane. The bottom leaves start to diverge a little from that two-dimensional form, but again, this one, we're not talking about hugely large plants, especially at this stage. Very easy in a pot, indoors in a nice brightly lit location. And we've got this final cylindrical type here again. This one, the leaves are less fully cylindrical, and more channeled. So you can just see at the top here where it forms this channel leading to the tip. This one in a larger pot can get quite a bit larger, and like the sparkles, will shoot out new shoots from the base and again form a clump. Within a larger pot will form quite a large, nice clump. In growing these indoors, because they are succulent, we don't have to water them nearly as much as we would some of the other indoor plants. For most of the stuff that we grow inside the house, at most, I might water twice a month, And at least I might even only water once a month, depending on the time of season. With our subtropical climate here in Zambia, when we have our cool, dry season, usually between April to about July, beginning of August, temperatures are quite low. Plants are not going to be utilizing a lot of the water. And usually the amount of sunshine is slightly lower than what it is during the actual growing season. So at that time of year, I will only give these plants water once a month. Mainly just because they are succulent, they will store that water. And only watering once a month then just helps to keep them a little more turgid so that they don't start to wrinkle and dehydrate a little bit more. Now, fertilizing these Sansevieria, again, only really fertilize during the latter half of the hot season. So I would normally start fertilizing these by October, and that's fertilizing once every 2 waterings. So if you're watering once a week, then do it twice in a month. If you're watering once every 2 weeks, do it once every 2 months, effectively. An easy, soluble fertilizer, well-balanced, will suffice on these. Again, if you're growing them indoors, you don't have to do the fertilizer at full strength. Usually a half-strength solution will be best, because if you give them too much, they will put on too much luxuriant growth, and sometimes what happens with that is the stems do not, or the leaves, sorry, do not form strongly, and the plants can have a tendency to kind of spill over, fall over on itself. But otherwise, these are very easy, very forgiving indoor house plants. And for anybody who's wanting to start getting into growing plants in the house, Sansevierias are one of the best plants to start with. You can experiment, you can try it in a few different places to see how it grows. But always remember, in terms of where its location is, in a darker environment, it doesn't need as much water. In a brighter environment, it'll need a little bit more watering. But again, not a lot of water. They don't want too much water, or else you will have plants start to rot. And once that happens, you have to let them dry out and see if you get any more regrowth from it. But otherwise, a very easy indoor starter plant, highly recommended, and a lovely one to kind of have as an accent.